Now we move to the panel discussion. Industry insights about UEBA. The panel, the purpose really give you the different perspective. So we want to bring you from a vendor point of view, the consulting point of view, the user point of view. So hopefully you get a kind of a complete picture about what this technology can help you with your use cases. To support that, we will bring back Sam and John. We will also have two additional panel speakers here. So we have Amit. Amit is a Director of Behavior Analytics and Insider Threat Data Protection at Royal Bank of Canada, RBC, which is on the user side. Well, we're also pleased to have Hoda from KPMG Canada. Hoda is the Cyber Defense Manager at KPMG, so which also on the consulting side. So now you have the solution provider, consulting, and the user side. Hopefully we will have some meaningful discussion and give you some information helpful. So at the beginning, since I already introduced John and Sam, so I will ask Amit and Hoda to give a little bit kind of a self-introduction to let people know who you are and what you do, maybe 30 seconds or a minute. Let's start with Hoda first.
Sure. Thank you, Bryan. Very happy to be on this panel, and I really learned a lot from Sam and John. So as Bryan said, I'm a cyber defense manager in KPMG. I'm working closely with clients in security operations, advisory projects in cyber threat intelligence, logging and monitoring, and security risk and controls. So UEBA is one of the areas that our clients are interested in, because it helps them with compliance, and it's and even from assessment point of view, and also it's something that can work in connection with threat intelligence and security operations. So I will be discussing UEBA from consulting point of view today.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Hoda. Great to have you here. Amit, can you give a quick introduction?
Thanks, Bryan. So I'm currently leading the Behavior Analytics and Insider Risk section at RBC. I primarily have a background in analytics and data science. Most of my work has been in different domains of cybersecurity, primarily around identity, cyber, fraud, and AML, and so on and so forth. Initially, I did kind of work on UEBA a long time back, and now I think it's much more of a focal point for me, especially with people working from home. It has taken on a much more bigger kind of aspect in today's work. I think Sam and John did a great work in introducing what UEBA is and different facets of it. So I'm really glad to be here as a panelist and kind of show some more perspectives on some of the questions you may have. So really glad to be here. Thanks.
Thank you, Amit. And one of the things I need to let you know is when we come up with each month the topic, we actually hear all kind of feedback and from our industry experts, the people, and the survey, all kind of things. And for today's topic, actually pitched by Amit several months ago. So we kind of looking at it and we really feel that's a really important topic. So we put it together. Thank you. So for that note, thank you very much, Amit. And Sam and John, I already gave you the official introduction for yourself based on your bio, but I like to hear a little bit your self-introduction. Anything interesting, just to quickly share with us. Let's start with John first.
I would say that I come from a security analyst background. That's what I love most about what I do in sales engineering today, is that I'm working with customers to deploy these solutions. I still get to have a broad experience with customers on the front lines who tell me what their issues are, what they've tried before, if we can solve it for them. And I'm just really appreciative of that experience. Cybersecurity is a really fun space.
Excellent. So you need to be in the ranch to know the inside out, all those things. What's the pain point? What's the solution? So which John will help with that. Great. Sam, you are our old friend and spoke at one of our events before. Glad to have you back. And anything new?
Thanks, Bryan. Glad to be back. And wow, so many things that make this topic so interesting. I think throughout my long career within technology, right? I started with software engineering and then studying mathematical models and looking at how do you even begin to solve these problems, and they're difficult problems to solve, to then moving into the kind of client-facing side with introduction of cloud computing for most commercial businesses, and moving towards cloud computing as a way for us to now start looking at big data sets, data lakes, and be able to do huge statistical analysis models to start looking at these solving these problems. To then moving into security, a lot of what John touched on was really spot on. Really great to see that, and then kind of share some of those views. And now being in privacy and risk and compliance, where now I'm looking through things through a slightly different lens, right? From the standpoint of the risk managers, the standpoint of certain CISOs, if they've got that risk management purview in their portfolio as well, and going, how do we make all these things come together and work more efficiently, so we're not having to jump out to a million portals to deal with too many alerts. So definitely a really good topic. Very interesting here, and happy to be here.
Excellent. Thank you, Sam. All right. Okay, so you hear the quick introduction about our panel members. So let's start with our panel discussion. And in the meantime, I really also encourage you to submit your questions to our panels. So we will do our best to use your question as much as possible to ask our panels. In the meantime, I do have some questions I already prepared and I want to ask our panel. So the first question is, both Sam and John touch on the concept of UEBA and use cases. So you probably already know some of the definitions, some of the use cases. But my question actually on the other side is, what is not about UEBA? So which means, what are some misconceptions typically you observed about UEBA? So with that things, I think I probably gave Hoda the first thing because you're in the consulting field. Let's see what you bring to the table.
Absolutely, Bryan. So I start a little bit with what a UEBA is, just to sum up what Sam and John said. So UEBA is basically about connecting the dots between the users, their behaviors, and the technology. So basically, people, process, and technology. These are the main pillars of UEBA. It uses advanced analytics to basically uncover abnormal behavior compared to the baseline behavior. So one of the misconceptions that I have noticed it's out there in some of the clients that we just start working with is that UEBA can replace your SIM or your traditional security solutions. This is actually a misconception because UEBA is providing some kind of advanced behavioral analysis on top of the regular traditional security tools that you had. So for example, SIM is helping you analyze event data, logs data, and create alerts, and it's good for for compliance or for certain alerts that's kind of more static. However, UEBA is helping you to prioritize your alerts, for example, or it helps you to combine data from different sources, like DLP, EDR, SIM, I don't know, firewalls, from your network, from your users. So it adds value on top of the traditional security tools that you have. So as time goes by and we're getting better with this tool, it's actually becoming one of the features of traditional security solutions like SIM. So yeah, that's basically one of the misconceptions that I've noticed about UEBA. Another misconception that I have faced is that the more data you have and the more data you analyze, the better analytics and insights you're going to get from UEBA. However, the reality is the quality of data is maybe more important than the quantity of data. So this is similar to some of the misconceptions that are out there, for big data. So as John interestingly said, attacks are not in silos, but attack data are. So what can actually provide you with a lot of value is to combining quality data from various sources and prioritizing incidents and alerts using UEBA. So what you need to have in mind about your data is the variety of the sources, first of all, and second of all, the velocity of data, trying to have real-time logs and data. So that these are the things that add more value, rather than just having a huge amount of data.
Excellent. I do see our other panel members nodded while you are speaking. I think you touched on some key points. One is the relationship between UEBA and among UEBA and other security controls. And the other part is about data. If we let garbage in, garbage out, then can we get the right result? That's a very great insight. Amit, can you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I guess, for the most part, people view UBA as a silver bullet that can come in and detect all kinds of complex scenarios that are just difficult to detect. And primarily, it can be attributed to the way we view AI or machine learning in general, which is something that is hard to do, something that can come to the rescue. However, what really kind of depends on is how do you view risk in general? And to me, the manifestations of risk can be multifaceted. It can have privacy risk. You can have IT service disruptions. You can have actual malicious users. You can have IP theft. You can have loss of life, and you can have various scenarios that can emanate from an insider risk perspective. And when you kind of try and bring UBA into the fold, the idea should be that which manifestation you're really targeting and to what extent, and how do you kind of approach that? That's particularly one of the important things to consider, because just having an ML and a machine learning lens is not really going to help a lot unless the risk aspect is really well understood. Some of the other misconceptions I think around UBA is also around what strategy you have in place to roll that out. Most of the time, UBA will be used in complementing your security stack in general, like DLP, SOC, and whatnot. The idea here, though, is that how do you complement those things together? How do you make sure the false positives are in a way that are confident enough for analysts to look at and spend time on? Initially, when you kind of strategize UBA and select the use cases, that I think becomes the most important part in the journey of UBA. I've seen attempts being made of rolling out UBA with many number of use cases and many number of domains and generating different alert types. What is missing here is the decisioning side of things. How do you take decisions on the alerts? And given that the number of people who will look at these alerts have many different alerts to look at, I think the first part should be that how do you strategize UBA in selecting the most appropriate cases eligible for you? That I think would be the most important thing here.
Excellent. Because that's a very unique angle also, because Amit, from you mentioned from your background, a lot of related to technology side of the data scientist, algorithm things. But what you bring to table, the insights, actually, we also need to consider the overall risk management, different types. And also, there's no silver bullet. You have to have a strategy put there to looking at the UEBA. So that's a very good insight. Sam and John, do you want to add anything on that?
I think, definitely agree with what both Amit and Hoda said. I think they covered a large number of what was on my mind as well around, the introduction of UEBA, integration of UEBA into SIM solutions, but certainly having had customers come to me and say, that is what we're using and we've got it. or that misconception. I think the two for me are, that customers have come and said, this is a silver bullet, it's going to help solve all my security problems, which we know is not the truth. It doesn't work that way. And then the other one is more feeds implies that I get better intelligence, implies that I get better security, but it's not about the volume of data. It's about the quality, the context, and then the analytic model. And also, at the end of that, what do you do with those? What do you do with that insight? How do you handle it?
Excellent. Feels like it's a comprehensive multi-factors, right? So the process, it's not just a single area you're very strong, then you solve all the things. Let's move on to our next question. So I think we actually touched on that already. So UEBA itself as a solution, so it serves for our overall security program. So what is his position? What is that position for the UEBA in our overall security program or security strategy? Can you kind of from your area or practice to share some insights? How important is this UEBA? What role is it playing? Amit, because you're on the user side, maybe you share some insights there first.
Yeah, sure, happy to. So, I mean, a couple of years back, if I go back, let's say 4 years, UBA was kind of, seen with curiosity, seen with something that is interesting, something that can disrupt the security landscape, something that could be useful, but, still very, very curious about it. However, in today's world, especially with the way the pandemic has shaped up and the way that people are working from home, the risks have, kind of changed in many different ways. Our traditional understanding of how people operated has changed, and the way we kind of used to view risk has evolved. So overall, I would say at this point in time, UBA has kind of transformed that curious aspect into more of a, we really need that as well. In terms of actually having that, kind of a full-blown UBA piece where we completely rely on that, there's still a journey to be traversed there. And that's simply because of the fact that the way we implement UBA in many different, organizations and overall in anywhere is about, the effectiveness of it. And when it comes down to effectiveness, the only question that people are concerned with is how much risk can it actually reduce and at what kind of, cost. And so at this moment, I would say it's still kind of, it's a journey to kind of go from a risk or a possible anomaly to an actual threat, for example. And that journey has still to be matured. And at this, I think, point in time, UBA is definitely kind of viewed as something that can be improved upon, something that can mature, something that can slowly go into different aspects of security. Things like privacy can be matured from that. DLP controls can be complemented much better. The SIEM systems perhaps can be made, much better as well. But it all really relies on what decisions can you actually take from these alerts? What kind of, use cases are you going after? What I have seen personally is that going after too many, cases, going after too many things of what looks anomalous, even, peer groups and all that is useful, but the more useful part is to kind of actually narrowly focus approach on certain predefined notions of risk and see that UBA can actually deliver on those fronts first before rolling out into all different kinds of risk.
All right. So that's really from a user point of view, you see some challenges and some you mentioned the journey, right? So that's really important. Is how UEBA can help with that your security journey. Speaking of that, John, do you have anything you want to add on that?
I think that's an excellent point, and that goes to a point I was making at the end of my presentation about how we're already flooded with alerts. I've never had a meeting with a customer who said, you know what, we're done with all of our alerts at noon every day, and we're looking for a new red blinking light. We're just really sitting around with nothing to investigate. It's never happened. I've never talked to a team like that. And so if a UEBA, if you're already struggling with 1,000 alerts a day and a UEBA promises to bring in 50 more, what's the value, right? And so I think that any UEBA that isn't helping you to prioritize and to triage effectively and helping you spend your time wisely is not useful. And so any customer that says, oh, just feed your anomalies to my SOAR, just feed anomalies to my SIM, I tell them this is not an operation. It's not a plan for success, right? You really need to be working in a funnel type system. The context and everything needs to reduce the amount of work that you're performing. So I think it's well said.
Excellent. Yeah, so on one side, the technology is cool, right? So we have all those new terms keep popping up, including UEBA, SOAR, or like a DLP, all those things. But security or the company is not, your job is not to collect those tools. Really is how to use the tools to help with your practice. So that's the very important part. Hoda, so from your perspective, what do you want to share with us?
Sure. Yeah, I actually wanted to add something to the excellent points that other panelists had. So I think whether you want to go for UEBA or not, or what the role of your UEBA is in your security program, also depends on organization's level of maturity. So if you're a very small organization, maybe you need to think twice to see if UEBA is the right tool for you, because you know, as great as it is, it needs some, you know, the management, it needs some advanced techniques, you know, advanced analytics and management of, you know, basically these advanced statistical techniques and, I don't know, machine learning, etc. It needs special talent, right? And it can be difficult. So it really depends on the kind of use cases that you're looking for. Are you mostly you know, concerned about compliance at this point? Are you want to have a basic security posture? So if yes, then if you already have that, you know, if you're a bigger organization, you have more resources and you are more mature, you have a better security posture, and you're on top of your endpoint detection and response and things like that, then yes, it's a good idea. But if you're just at the beginning of your journey, you know, just the building a you know, basic security posture, yeah, I mean, it may not be for you yet. So yeah, that was the other point that I wanted to add to that.
Excellent. So it really depends on your company context and also the use case or the problem you try to solve, right? So it's not just buying a tool. Sam, what's your recommendation?
Maybe I'll put a little different spin on it, kind of looking at it from a solution provider perspective, kind of seeing where UEBA is going and where it's coming up in different, you know, different security programs, both our own as well as within the customers I talk to. What's interesting to see is this evolution of UEB solutions. From when I first interfaced with it was through a UEB solution that we provided or acquired that did UEB analysis of Active Directory authentications, right? And it expanded to include entities that connected to Active Directory. And it was a standalone solution that didn't really connect to anything, did its own thing, it was a black box. To now seeing this evolution where vendors are, you know, starting to work together. We've got UEBA being further integrated in different solutions, where rather being a standalone discipline, it's becoming, you know, a cool piece of technology that's helping us find all sorts of different patterns in different use cases, different sets of use cases. And kind of touching on what Amit pointed out, is like the challenge now is going to be for organizations, which are the use cases that are important to us, that we want to prioritize, that we want to start with within our risk mitigation program, and then looking at what it takes to implement those, because it's very easy to say, hey, I want UEBA, and go, wow, there's a lot of different vendors out there. There's a lot of different solutions that, you know, they may on surface look like they do the same things, but when you dig under the covers, like, no, this one does this use case, this one does this one. It's like, where do I start? So it's interesting seeing that evolve and where it starts to integrate into different areas of the organization's security programs.
Excellent. So we hear the insights from different angles about whether you need a UEBA for your security program and what kind of things you need to pay attention to. We do have a couple of questions for people submit online. Some of them related to, I think that's from Chris, about should we use a use case model or should we base on the risk scoring? Before we touch on that one, let's talk a little bit about the challenges. So assume your organization or company want to implement UEBA, right? So we, after all those feasibility study, all those research, you think, okay, we need a UEBA. What can you expect, or what kind of roadblocks or challenges? So our panel members can help to point out, okay, you want to implement this, here are certain areas you probably want to pay attention to. So the question is, what are some challenges in implementing UEBA? With that, I think I will let John start first, because you touch on a lot of use cases.
Yeah, this is it's actually really related to similar to Chris's question as well. A critique I'll give to both customers and vendors. A lot of customers will come and say, we want UEBA, and the answer is, and the question we'll ask first is why? What do you want to accomplish? And the answer is usually pretty vague. It is general security posture. I want better visibility. I want to find anomalies on my network. Trust me, you don't want any of those things. You can find a million anomalies that are not related to threats. And so how you can be better is to define where you believe you're weak in your security monitoring program and ask vendors specifically, can you help me address these gaps? On the flip side of that, vendors can also make the same mistake. A customer will say, listen, this is what's in my pantry. These are the 10 logs I have. What can you cook with that? What kind of value can you bring to my organization? And I think a lot of UEBA vendors are not good at making that value pitch and being specific about what they will be able to accomplish besides show anomalies, right? And so I think as the better we are on both sides of the spectrum of defining what we want, the more success we'll have.
Yes, so that's a great insight. It's not just the one party need this that do their job. We need a collaboration among multiple parties together to work on that. All right, Amit, any insights there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it all comes down to, I mean, it doesn't matter which path you take to implement UEBA or UEBA, but eventually it will come down to about 5 things. So one is obviously around what use cases you select. What's your strategy in terms of going about what risk you want to mitigate? So that's important to understand. It's not very straightforward because you probably have a security stack that's looking into different things. So you have to understand how do you come up with the right use case and the right approach to kind of target that. The second thing is around, what data are you collecting for that? And it's easier said than done, especially in large organizations or even in small ones. The logs need to be normalized and they have to be collected and they have to be baselined. And really, it's actually not that trivial as well. And sometimes it requires the infrastructure needed to support that kind of data collection and normalization. So that's, again, some of the challenge as well in terms of how do you go about making sure that you have the right data and you have the right coverage to kind of actually get that use case done effectively. The third, of course, is how do you model the baseline properly? How do you make sure that the peer grouping is done properly? How do you make sure that the model is actually working in a way that it should work? It's not really a black box. It gives you indicators of why something is anomalous, and it gives you multiple contexts around that risk as well. I think that's very, very crucial as well, because that kind of sets the tone of how much confidence you can place in these event alerts that you're getting from that model. And the next section would be around that these alerts that you get, to me, those are still events. They're just anomalies, they're just events that really don't have a risk aspect to it. Unless someone comes in and looks at it and actually understands that, yes, this is interesting, we can prioritize it in a way that complements my this particular security stack, my this DLP solution or my that theme solution. And when you prioritize that, and when you overlay that with whatever solution that you already have in place or you may not have, that's when the incident journey begins, because every kind of whatever risk you are targeting, privacy risk or theme kind of systems, other such risks, each of them will have to be each of them has to undergo a different process. And unless that process is built properly, a lot of thought has been bestowed on that, you can't really effectively take a good action on that. So that's really, really important to kind of develop that risk remediation pathways in terms of how do you automate that kind of process to make sure that risk actually gets converted into an incident, and finally routing it back, in terms of feedback back to the model, back to the different control stacks. So once you do have an incident, what do you learn from that? Can you actually improve your model better? How do you make the feedback kind of automated so that you actually get effective results on a continuous fashion? So that when you do your KPIs, you can actually have a fair amount of confidence in that, and you can showcase that this is sustainable. So I guess overall these are I think the challenges here.
There are quite many challenges, and but it's good we point out, especially from people already implement those, so point out those potential roadblocks so you can plan something in ahead. Okay, so from consulting perspective, Hoda, what do you see there? So what kind of challenges you probably observe?
Sure, Bryan. So Amit touched on the, identifying the data that you need and also the use cases that basically organizations need to identify. I wanted to touch on the requirement identification challenge. So basically what UEBA does is giving you context. So for getting that context, you need to have a good understanding of your assets. What are your high priority assets, high value assets? What are your intellectual properties? What kind of sensitive data are resided in which of your assets? And also, you need to have a good understanding of your users. Who are your privileged users? Who are your VIP accounts? So my experience shows that organizations have difficulty in understanding even all of the assets that they have in the organization. For example, one of the challenges that we have when I was working in a basically a SOC was getting a good asset list or asset inventory from the clients, because it was super challenging. Everything was dynamic, everything was changing, and our clients really had difficulty to understand and keep their asset list up to date. So that's another, that's a real challenge with UEBA as well. So I think this is super important to be able to get a good context from UEBA. So if you don't identify these recommendations, your high value assets and high value users, then the result that you're getting from UEBA is probably not what you want. There's going to be a lot of false positives, and you're going to need to do a lot of tuning, manual tuning. So yeah, I think this is a part that our different clients in retail, energy, especially the clients with a lot of different endpoints and very extended operations are dealing with, and yeah, need help with.
Excellent. So you get a consulting perspective from there. So a lot of insights gained from a previous project. Talking about those asset management is very, very critical for UEBA. All right, Sam, anything to add to the challenges?
I think both Amit and Hoda touched a lot on the challenges to consider for customers and organizations looking to implement UEBA solutions. And so maybe I'll kind of complement those great points with again thinking about this from a solution perspective, right? What can we, how can we make these tools better so that they're easier to deploy, that some of these challenges are not so much challenges. I think one is around looking at the analytic models, right? And how do we find out, how do we strike a balance between the ones that are very black box, we feed it in, we come out, and then we kind of have to trust it, it's magical, to the ones that are like, here's the open algorithm. It's entirely up to you how you fine tune it, but it could take you years, and it could take you, lots of resources and data scientists in order to do that. And, we've kind of seen both experience and talked to a lot of customers with, also both sets of experiences. And so I feel like we're in that stage where it's like, how do you find that delicate balance between something that is, a quick time to market, but still allows organizations to have some of that customizability, so that they can cater for the unique scenarios that are unique to them, versus at the moment, at least within the, our solution set, where they have to come up and give us that feedback, as opposed to something I touch on kind of at a really high level in my talk around semi-supervised machine learning models, where, it's a combination of that unsupervised model, and we push out based on our own research and our own work, but also allow customers to somehow apply labels to the signals that they're seeing, and you actually feed that back into the model real time and go, this is relevant, this is not, and so that model kind of has an element of teaching done for it. And then the third area is around privacy, right? This is often top of mind because we're talking about a large volume of data. There's a lot of data. So I think as a community, we have to think about, how are we collecting all of that data? Where are we using it? And who has access to it? Right? It's great that it goes into a model, but where does that data surface up? Who could potentially see that? And what controls do we have to ensure that, while we're doing this with good intentions, that the privacy of all of our users, all the entities, all the activities that we see are still respected, not just because it's regulated, but it's also because it's, that's the right thing to do.
Excellent. Sam, you're actually touching on some our next question regarding how can we continuously improve the UEBA. I guess the effort, one, of course, from the vendor point of view, how do you make a continuously improve your product, like a balance between customization and the features. But on the other side is how, from user side, how can we make sure we continuously improve the performance of UEBA? It's not like just we deploy once, then forget about it. For example, I think Paul has a great questions. So let's say if we like implement UEBA to maybe 1 or 2 years ago, so it get used to all kind of algorithm about typical corporation, the pattern, the user behavior, entity behavior, but the pandemic really disrupt the normal, what we call normal things. So how can we, like with that UEBA solution, can quickly recognize the change of the pattern and adapt to that kind of change, which also continuously improve the performance, make that adaptable. So this is a kind of question I like to hear a little bit more from you guys. Maybe John, you want to start?
Yeah, that's a complicated one. I'll try and be succinct and not go on an engineering rant on this one. I'm going to give 2 examples. First, I think UEBA solutions should be capable of resetting models, not only in the event of pandemics, but before that, one of the most common use cases.
We lost your voice.
I apologize there. Is that better?
Okay, yeah, we can hear you now. Yeah.
Perfect. I would say that when there were job position changes, there would be major changes in their roles and responsibilities, what they would access. And so having the ability to reset models and retrain them is really important. But the other part I want to address is over-tuning models. I would see that a lot of times customers do more damage when they're trying to, in the early days of bringing the product on board, to look at an anomaly and to force a machine to learn that this was normal. And they didn't really mean that it was normal. They meant it was benign. But customers are used to whitelisting behavior they don't want to see again, right? If you get an alert in another tool and you see it, you don't want to see it again, you have to take action or you will see it forever. And so breaking that habit and letting a UEBA properly learn behavior before you go and hit it with a hammer, I think is equally important. So I just want to extend that caution as well.
Okay, so give a bit time, let it learn a little bit, right? So rather than disrupt the flow. And okay, Amit, any thoughts on that one?
No, that's really a good question again. I mean, inherently, we assume that UBA should adapt because the idea is that, it learns baselines. So the question should be about how quickly can it, learn these baselines? How effectively can it learn? And how far back does it go to actually learn these baselines? How far back does it have to go? Of course, this pandemic was very disruptive and it immediately changed, all that, these patterns and the way we were working. So it does take some time to kind of adapt to that environment. Overall, I would say that it's not just about these models trying to become better in terms of how they adapt to these things. It's also about how are we treating risk now? In terms of if we're getting these alerts, are we changing in terms of how we view risk? Are there some new risks that have emerged because of this particular situation? And if so, what are those risks? How do we prioritize them? And does it kind of cover in terms of UBA, or does UBA cover those new scenarios at all? Flexibility is of course important because as time goes by, these new conditions will emerge, and our hope is that the models can kind of be flexible enough to not only capture the baseline but also add new use cases, add new risk scenarios, and kind of prioritize those risk scenarios as time goes by. Because ultimately, it comes down to what action we can take from these, and is the risk being reduced in the changing landscape?
The risk side is very important, not just the technology algorithm side, right? So you have to serve for your purpose and also adapt from the risk profile change. Hoda, well, what's your suggestion there?
Yeah, so I wanted to add to what Amit said, that pandemic has basically introduced new risks, because of the, disruption in normal and how we have, started to work during the pandemic, mostly remote work. And so we have seen a lot of new devices basically, added to the networks as a, kind of a lot of OT devices, IoT devices. So we've seen a proliferation of OT on top of IT devices. And also we've seen an increase in attack vectors. So there has been a lot of phishing going on since the beginning of the pandemic. Even the ransomware attacks, we have seen a lot of rise in those. So these are the kind of risks that I think UEBA can help with, containing and mitigating. So for example, in terms of the increase in phishing attacks. So this is something that can increase into more compromised users. So this is a kind of insider threat. So it's not intentional, but I mean, if the users are just fall victim to phishing attacks and their username and passwords are compromised, then that can be used as a kind of lead to lateral movement and a lot of other stuff. So that's where UEBA comes into play a lot. So I think this kind of highlights the role of UEBA as a result of the how things have changed during the pandemic. And also as I touched on ransomware attacks, so the thing is right now the trend that we're seeing in ransomwares is that many of them have basically originally the ransomwares were designed for IT, not OT. But now many of the ransomwares are including kill lists for OT as well. So it's very easy for a ransomware. For example, if you're OT that's not, for example, let's say medical device, for example, or manufacturing machine that doesn't have a, that is not patched and it's doesn't have a very strong security posture, which is widespread. If it becomes victim to a ransomware, then that compromise can penetrate to your IT network and create a lot of problems. So I think UEBA can also help with that as well, because of the abnormalities and abnormal behavior that it can detect even in IoT and OT. That's another use case that's kind of enhanced use case for UEBA as a result of the pandemic.
Very good. You actually add more use cases on top of John's 10 top 10 use cases. So that's very cool. Sam, any quick suggestion there?
Yeah, just a quick couple of comments. And as a sidebar, I do like John's suggestion of being able to reset a model, because that is one of the challenges. One of the challenge I see today with models, that if the bad behavior is already there when the solution is put in, it becomes part of the baseline. It becomes a blind spot for us. And so I do like that idea of, being able to have that option to do a reset if we think a model is bad. And on the question around the pandemic, I do feel that's where, until AI and our analytic models get better and get smarter, that human element is going to remain in there, right? To be able to do that triage. And I know it's asking our SOC teams and our risk analysts to do a lot more. And hopefully that's where, having these smart models help us to prioritize what is compelling, what's interesting, and what's not. So at least, it's helping them sift through the noise. But I think that is one area that is, for the near term, still going to remain. And then, UEBA or deployment of UAB solutions do need to work, I feel, together with other programs like Zero Trust, right? Having that mindset of never trust, always verify, and really in that way, it's giving us, and giving the model time to learn, to make that adjustments, because those models are not perfect, and we're until we get there, working with those other programs give us that overlapping security until the model has time to adjust and learn.
Excellent. And I specifically like Sam, you're touching on the human factor part, right? So although UEBA is a very cool technology solution, but we also need to have people to use it, to implement that, to really help with the business and the risk management, which actually lead to our last question. Also considering the time, we always reserve this question in the end for almost any topic. So the question is, let's say today you want to build a UEBA team for your company. So what kind of skills? So for the talent development point of view, if you build that team, what kind of skills, what kind of qualifications or like capabilities you are looking for your team members?
Thanks, Bryan. So I guess it all depends on how UEBA is implemented, or how do you kind of go about doing or approaching this particular thing. Of course, if it's being done in-house, and if you kind of take on that challenge, then you need data engineers, you need data scientists, ML engineers, possibly DevOps engineers to kind of put that in and string it all together. You need people who can look at incidents, depending on whether it's a privacy, it's a DLP incident, it's a SOC incident, the ability to kind of route that to the right aspect. But really, I mean, it all comes down to how this is implemented. I can even go ahead and say that, the way we treat risk is paramount, in the way we'll do hiring. So usually, you can be reactive in terms of UBA. So you can kind of take decisions on things that have already happened, but you can also be proactive and kind of, ask questions around why did the person do the thing that they did? And can we actually influence those behaviors in future so that we actually avoid something like this? So then you need, people like behavior scientists. You need cyber awareness team to influence those behaviors and whatnot. So essentially, it all comes down to the strategy, but really, I think analysts, DLP analysts, data scientists, machine learning engineers, people who understand some of these algorithms if, implemented in-house, people who can understand incidents and risk mitigation, all of that are key components in this.
Excellent. So those are the key qualifications. If you apply for a UEBA job, you probably consider to add to your resume. All right. On the other side, so I think Sam, John, and Hoda, so you experience a lot of clients, right? So you probably, besides that you advise on their product things or the solution things, you also observe they may have a different type or style of teams, right? So from that angle, and some company may not have a luxury like RBC have a team, right? So they maybe only have a one person there, right? Or one or two person kind of handle like areas. So what kind of, from talent development point of view, what kind of things you think are important? Anyone can jump in. I don't really need to call the name. Yeah.
Okay, I'll tackle that. I would say that this should be the benefit that a vendor brings to the organization, right? Is that the whole point of having a product as opposed to building something in-house is that it should be simplifying the ability for you to digest and bring on a UEBA solution. And so what I would say is make sure that the vendor is simplifying this process. Make sure that the do your pilots, do your demos, make sure that the UI is presenting data in a way that your team can digest. Typically, we work with customers who have no data scientists on staff. They're a SOC team. And so what is important to them is that our UEBA solution presents it in a security context, that it does not say that it is abnormal for this person to log into this server. It says this may be indicators of lateral movement. Here's the MITRE technique and tactic that it relates to. Here's the use case and the threat that it relates to. The tickets that are open come with pre-built task lists that recommend how do you determine if this is benign behavior, steps that you can follow. And so I would say that if you're bringing in a UEBA for a SOC, then stick with analysts, stick with people who have inquisitive minds, who are able to piece together contextual information and investigate threats.
Excellent. We have 2 minutes left. Hoda and Sam, can you quickly add a couple of 1 or 2 points there? Hoda first.
Sure. Yes. So if if I want to hire someone to help with UEBA projects, I'm gonna be looking for an understanding of integrated technologies and architecture, because clients are not usually working. They have a suite of products that basically work together, and they usually use UEBA in tandem with other products like SOAR, EDR, SIM, etc. So someone who has a good knowledge of security and basically security attacks and use cases, as well as how these solutions can work together, that's going to be super helpful. And also another thing that I'm looking that person is being able to help the client to identify their their requirements basically, and how to get the best out of UEBA. So being familiar with assessment, different frameworks that are out there, and also requirement identification, kind of doing like project management or solution development. Some kind of, these are kind of soft skills that I'm looking for, that I think it's gonna complement their security knowledge.
Excellent. So if you apply for Hoda's team, you know what should you write, right? Sam, very quickly, anything
so just gonna mirror both what John and Hoda said, right? When you think about the approach that we've taken at Microsoft and how we built our insider management program and what we've put together as a product, it is more about empowering the people that are there, that are part of those teams, that are dealing with the portal fatigue, the alert fatigue, and hopefully, it's helping them, do their jobs more efficiently, and putting a new lens through how they triage through all these incidents and incidents management. I definitely think, if I'm looking across the people who are going to be most effective in bringing together all these solutions, because there are a number of different UEB solutions, I would be looking for the folks that, have a lot of experience around SIM and SOAR solutions, because ultimately I do think that's where a lot of these alerts, even when they're prioritized, when they've got the context added to it, that's where they're going to end up for incident response and for orchestration of response and playbooks. And then the other one, I think a really important one that Hoda called out is, that requirements gathering, being able to look at what use cases are important for the organization, because it is very easy to get lost and go, let's go try boil the ocean, let's buy every UEB tool that's out there, and then you would have spent all this money and not really gotten anywhere.
Excellent. So now so for people who interested in, doesn't matter, it's Microsoft, Exabeam, RBC, KPMG, how things they are looking for. And also we actually cover a lot of use cases today. the use cases like in-depth insider threat, and also the top 10 use cases that John mentioned, and additional use cases Hoda and Amit bring to the table. So yeah, at the end of the day, really, how can we use leverage UEBA and other security tools to solve those, to meet the requirements of those use cases? All right, cool. Thank you very much. Speaking of the time, we're right on time, so that's we wrap up. And thank you again very much to our panel members. Again, Sam from Microsoft, John from Exabeam, Amit from RBC, and Hoda from KPMG Canada. Let's give them a virtual applause or pat. Thank you very much for coming to share the insight with us.